100 Days of Summer. I want to say welcome. I Never Knew TV, right?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Seriously, glad to have you. I was reading a report, and it said that it says that 73% of women have never experienced the orgasm.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I am.
And based on your interaction with women, do you believe that to be true, or is the number inflated?
No, I think it's true. I honestly believe it's true. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's just not common knowledge on what to do internally to make a woman have an orgasm. So I think that's really the reason, not because 73% can't or anything like that. I think it's just not common knowledge on how the sexual anatomy of the vagina actually works.
What are some of the things the brothers are falling short on to provide that experience for them?
I think it boils down to the fact that most of us learn sex through porn.
Fine, this man, I was about to sound like a good dude. Go ahead.
Yeah, so most of us learn sex through porn, and it's for a male fantasy, so kind of like the novels are for women fantasy, it's that those things show a skewed perspective. So you think that beating it up for 30 minutes is how you make a woman orgasm because that's how they always play it out and that, but in reality, you're not supposed to be ramming the back of the cervix because that's what's in the back of the vagina is the cervix, which is not a pleasure spot. It's a painful spot. So, a lot of women were literally reported to me as I surveyed them and stuff would say, yeah, I'm running from the whatever, or I end up in pain, but they're pretending that they're not in pain because they don't want to hurt the man's ego. So a lot of us, it's hard to believe when I say this to men because they've never experienced anyone critiquing them. You know what I mean? So for me, it's become very true. And you find that the spots you're supposed to hit is the ceiling of the vagina, not the actual back, because all the pleasure spots are located there. And also there's one, I guess you would say the floor of the vagina as well, but it's mostly about the ceiling. That's where the G spot and the A spot are located. And those are the two spots that actually create like the tension to stimulate into an actual orgasm.
Communication and conversation.
Yeah.
There's not enough conversation of what she enjoys and what will take her to that place. Have you heard that also?
Yeah, that's a very big thing. A lot of guys just assume that what worked with the last woman is going to work with this woman because no one ever complained, and because women are kind of geared to coddle men's ego in a sense, especially in that sense. A lot of them have reported that they don't feel safe to express themselves in that moment because of the interaction and how it could go. So they don't say anything, and sometimes they even still boost a man's ego after. So he's thinking, I just knocked it out the park. So he's not even thinking that I need to communicate the next time he goes to see a woman, And even if they did communicate, well, let me go back to the one thing you said about men not wanting to please women. What I honestly believe is that they think that they are. You know what I mean? So that's why they don't have to have the conversation. But I think if they knew what actually worked, they would lean all the way into it because they would still get that same adoration and ego stroke. And they, at the end of the day, they want to be good at sex. And there is also that magnetic pull towards the orgasm that kind of hijacks the mind, when you're thinking about having, being able to pleasure a woman or whatever. I used to go through that where I was dating this one girl in my early 20s, and I would tell her, we would be in the motion, and I'd tell her, I'm going to do this all night, and then I would finish, and that whole desire is out the window now. I never understood how that was working. And then it got to the point where I said it one night and then she was like, no, you're not. You're just going to finish and go to sleep. I was like, wow. That moment I realized the pattern, but I still didn't know how to overcome that at the time. So I honestly believe that men want to please women. They just are following the wrong path. And then women aren't necessarily chastising them for getting it wrong.
Through observation, I believe church plays a big role. I believe a lot of women have a shame vibe towards sex, and that's why they're not able to fully explore their sexual desires.
I never made the correlation between us being so heavy in church before, and that would cause that.
Because even if you don't go to church, you still have a Christian mindset.
That's true.
And it's extremes within our community. It's like you're full-blown out there,
Right.
or you're super conserved.
Yeah.
Not saying that you don't have sex though,
Right.
but you're
Right.
not really.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
I was in the church for like 10 years, and I mean, I struggled with trying to be celibate, you know, and even when I got out the church, I still had that complex in my mind to where I felt guilty having sex still, you know what I mean? Even though those beliefs were kind of gone or whatever, I still felt that like residue. And it took me a minute to get over that, especially doing what I'm doing now, you know, but it took me a minute to get over that. And yeah, I never thought about it that way. But yeah.
What advice would you give to men and women who struggle with really delving into their highest form of sexual expression within a proper structure? Right. I just want to be clear. We're not talking about being a whore or not. We're talking about with your mate, with your wife.
Yeah.
We're not talking about with random people.
Right. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to one who really kind of reserved? Like they doing their thing, but they reserved still, you know?
I mean, at the end of the day, one of the things I had to realize was like, even in the Bible, for example, right, where Adam eats from the tree and then he puts on the fig leaves, right? He puts on the fig leaves to cover up nakedness, but he was created naked. You know what I mean? So that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just that he judged it bad once he became aware of it. You know, and that's supposed to represent like us seeing aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily agree with or think align with God. You know what I mean? But that's the way he was created. So he was ashamed. In a sense, it's like saying that you know better than God on what you should be, you know? So you should embrace that aspect of yourself, because at the end of the day, God sees it. You know, it's not hidden from God. So it would be foolishness to try to cover up your nakedness in front of a being that's all seeing, you know? Just be yourself, because self-acceptance is like, that's the closest form to get into how God sees you. You know what I mean? So God accepted Adam naked. Adam didn't accept himself naked, and that got him kicked out of paradise. So this, in my opinion, the way to return back to paradise is to reverse engineer what it says, which was that at first it makes a blatant point to say that the man and his wife were naked but unashamed. And then they go on to make a point to show that they were then ashamed. That's the thing that got them kicked out the garden. You know, it says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it also says perfect love cast out all fear. God's perfect love, Adam became fear, he had to get out of there. You know what I mean? So I think to overcome that is to just accept yourself, you know, be naked and unashamed. I think that's what kept him in paradise on earth, in a sense.
Do you think stress is a big role in erectile dysfunction?
Yes, but I wouldn't consider it like day-to-day stress or work stress or anything like that. I think that sometimes it's the fear of not being able to perform, or even like the good stress, but you're so excited that you can't perform, you know what I mean? Because like there becomes a disconnect between the mind and body. And because I experienced it. When I was about 31, 32, I thought that I was going through erectile dysfunction, but it was actually performance anxiety, you know? So I would get in my head like, oh no, don't. And it's like, and then I'm thinking, oh, don't think, because if you're thinking, by that time it's too late. You know, you got to reconnect, you got to get back to the space you were in when you were aroused, because once you get in your head, you know, you disconnected from the body.
I never heard about that, performance anxiety.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I suffered with that for what felt like a year. And because the first time it happened, it was this girl I really, really wanted to be with. And she made a move. She was going down. And I'm like, oh my God, she's about to go down. And then I couldn't believe it. Like, what? This is the time to shine, you know? And I couldn't do it. And then the next time it happened, then the next girl it happened, I'm like, I gotta get ahead of this, you know what I mean? And so whenever I was about to have sex, I would instantly just think, I hope it don't happen. And then I'm out of my body, I'm in my head, you know? So it took me a minute to reverse that.
All right. Health reasons now for erectile dysfunction. Can you talk on that?
Yeah. I would say that you should, as far as the health stuff, you got to eat things that don't constrict blood flow and things that open up the veins or whatever it is, the vascular system or whatever. So typically things that are high in water, like fruit's going to have natural water in it automatically. They say watermelon, I think blueberries. Those are the two that I typically use, you know what I mean? And then I think there's some tree nuts too that you could eat that kind of help with that. But I try to, especially if it's right before I'm about to go in, it's like no dairy. I try not to have no meat, nothing heavy or typically greasy, because it's going to constrict the blood flow. You know what I'm saying? But I say mentally you can overcome those things, because desire is a powerful thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, definitely I would stay away from anything that's going to pretty much clog your arteries. You know what I mean?
And what about men when they no longer find their woman attractive? Married men.
Yeah, see, man, that's a tough one. I'm not married. I haven't been in too many real long-term relationships, but one thing that I try to do when I'm with a woman is to not have too much sex. Like I remember when I was in church, the last church I was in, we learned a lot about the Hebrew culture. And they, from at least the ancient Hebrews, I don't know about the Jewish people of today, like at least the ancient Hebrews, they only had sex about 2 weeks out of the month, because 1 week the woman was menstruating and it was unclean, and then I think she took a week to cleanse herself. So those were 2 weeks where you couldn't touch your wife. That creates a sense of desire when, the common like understanding that women have today is if I basically drain him before he leaves the house, then, I'll be fine. But what that does is it creates it builds a repulsion. Because we have to understand that, of course, no, people don't like to say this, but we're a part of the animal kingdom. We're human animals. And, procreation and all that and our proliferation, all those things are really what drive all our nature. So at the end of the day, when a man orgasms and he gets soft, that's nature's way of sending him to another woman. So in order to kind of counteract that, you have to practice semen retention, or at least orgasm retention, so the goal isn't to come. The goal is to have sex, to have intimacy, to please your woman, to create like a journey in a sense, but not necessarily to orgasm at the end, because one, if she doesn't orgasm, she's not done when you're done, So if you don't orgasm, you kind of keep this sexual arousal. It could go on for days, and you keep yourself pretty much at the edge, which heightens your desire, which also shapes your perspective. So you see her different. Like I've noticed that it makes me look at the woman and see her as being even more beautiful, because like when, exactly, you don't get the post clarity or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So instead you keep yourself, it's just manipulation of the mechanism. That's how I look at it. If we know how to manipulate animals, we can make them procreate all day. It's like if we understood ourselves the same way, then we could hijack that too. So you don't end up in a state where nature is basically trying to make you go plant seed in another ground, because that's really what it's about. So a man's refractory period is shortened if you bring another woman in the room. So it's that means something. So it's like you got to keep the woman new, because in the beginning, when we're in the honeymoon stage, which is basically nature bringing us together to procreate, together long enough to procreate. In the beginning, it's very easy. It's almost like you can't even imagine never, not wanting this woman. But eventually, nature, it takes its course, it does what it's supposed to do, and then it tries to drive you apart. So if you understand that, then you have to, take measures in order to try to mitigate that. And I think one of the best things to do would be reducing the amount of sex, almost to the point where you just wait until you can't take it anymore. It changes, it makes, it's like when you first with a woman and you're like really falling for her, you don't have time to argue. You could look over you know what I mean? So it's like you want to put yourself back in that state. That's what works for me.
All right. Why do some women need so much conversation before sex?
So I took a survey. It took me a year to finish this survey. And it's only 100 people who took it, but I just wanted 100 participants. And I asked, what is the number one thing that makes sex good for you? And the number one answer was connection. And at the time I didn't really understand what that meant, but at this time I've talked to so many women, like hours and hours in conversation, and I understand it now. I literally just asked on my page, like, what is the most intimate thing a man can do for you, and the majority of the women said, understand me, like learn me, listen to me, be like genuinely interested in who I am, and fortunately for me, because I do marketing, I'm all about understanding people and understanding what makes them tick and do what they do and stuff. So it kind of comes naturally. I'm genuinely inquisitive about people and human nature, like my living is based on it. You know what I mean? So I'm genuinely interested. So it comes a little natural for me. But asking questions to understand who she is, and then asking why about that, and then asking why about that, you know, literally trying to get down to the nitty gritty of understanding who she is typically what drives that connection, you know. And especially a lot of women these days consider themselves sapiosexual. So they are intellectually aroused, you know what I mean? So they like wit, they like actual stimulating conversation, long stimulating conversations and things like that. Because I mean, when you think about like I said, the fantasy for men is the porn stuff, but the fantasy for women comes to romance novels. So they're reading basically the book is in a sense letters, you know, love letters. That's the type of stuff that feeds them, you know, feeds that aspect of what they feel like is true romance and stuff. So it just makes sense, you know, that you would have to have like a conversation because that's the type of stuff that they're into.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, it just sounds like two worlds of fantasy. Men in fantasy with the porn, and women in fantasy with the novel books. Like, and we need to balance the thing out, you know?
Yes, we do.
I
agree.
In regards to sharing yourself, Fire, like, are you on a spiritual level, right? Have you noticed that you've been picking up bad energy from certain people when you share yourself with them?
This is one of my favorite questions. I get this all the time, actually, you know, because people always ask me, how do you cleanse yourself after? And I just hold the mindset that no one can do anything. And I found that that's been very successful. You know, it seems, I probably like super simple or, you know, if somebody doesn't believe in that, that probably sounds crazy or whatever, but it's like the belief that it can affect me makes it affect me. Because if I have the belief, typically when you have the belief, you look for signs that confirm. So if let's say I have sex with this girl and then I leave and I get a flat tire, if I believe in sexual energy, then I'm going to blame the tire on the encounter. But if I believe that no one can affect me, then the tire is just flat. So to me, that's like how I manipulate the energy of anything. Or basically, I feel like perception creates reality in that sense. So if I can control my perception, I control my reality and my outcomes. So there was a time when I believed that. I believed in succubus and incubus and all those types of things, and you know, but I just no longer do. And I find that my results have also changed based on that. Like when I was in church, that was heavy, you know, the demonic and things like that, where I was heavily focused on my consequences and dealing with certain things that I thought brought that on. And I just no longer believe that anymore. And it seems that my life has mirrored that.
And when I say, I apologize for not clearing the question. Okay. When I say on a spiritual, I don't mean like ghosts and goblins and demons.
Okay.
I mean actual the energy of the person interacting in your life.
Yes.
Because there has to be a certain level of interaction with this person.
Yes.
To get to a sexual point.
Yes,
100%,
right? Yeah.
So the fact that all these people are coming into your life, have you noticed like it's just been a clean split? It hasn't impacted you at all?
Clean split as far
in regards to like you just do what you do, they go about their day and it's done.
Clean split for me, yes.
Yeah.
Not always for them, you know, to be honest. Clean split for me typically because I don't, so let me put it this way. I deliberately try to set my paradigm based on what I learned from people who died and came back to life, right? So they explain what the other side is like, and then I take that into consideration. Just like if I was to hear somebody talk about Nigeria, you know, like if I want to go, I listen to them about what it's like. I listen to the commonalities, and then I kind of get my own, you know, understanding. But I won't really know until I go, you know. But I listen to them to try to understand the culture of the other side, because that frame of mind seems to be the most beneficial here. At least since I've been living that way, it's been night and day, you know. So that's kind of my perspective. So it just shapes the way I see the connections, you know. And it's like, say for example, I don't believe in strangers. You know what I mean? I believe that everybody met on the other side beforehand, and this is why we're having this conversation now, you know, and things like that. So it's hard for me to feel attachment in that sense, because I feel like we're eternally connected. You know, I don't know. I don't know if that sounds weird or whatnot, but that's, you know, that's where I come from as far as seeing life and stuff. And most people that I know do not. So their interactions with me are different. You know, what they walk away with a lot of times is different, But the majority of the conversation is about that thing I was just talking about, as far as spiritual and all those types of things. So I try to explain myself in that sense so that they would know I'm straight up front. My expectations or my boundaries, my limitations, what I can and cannot give is all up front. So I at least try to do that beforehand, but it doesn't always stop the connection from forming on the other side and stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah, just be honest.
Do women, modern day women collectively, right?
Yeah.
Do they really want to get married? Do you think they really want to get married?
I think that it's a conflict. I think they do, because I think that's been ingrained in them, and also they're more geared for that type of bonding. You know what I mean? As far as, even as like, if we're looking at it just as far as nature goes, they're more vulnerable. They would fare much better if they had a man. So I think that's in there, and I think as humans we all want to connect. But I also believe that they've been liberated in a sense that makes them no longer have to have a man. And then there's a certain level of freedom that comes with that. And if you want security, you have to give up some freedom. You know what I mean? And so I don't think that that's easy for a lot of women to give up this freedom in order to have a man.
Explain, what do you mean by freedom, though? What freedom?
Like basically freedom to do what you want to do. Like there was a time when women didn't have their own income, or they didn't have a substantial income, so they needed a man to survive, But in the past, like when America went to, I think, the First and Second World War, when the women got into the workforce, they divorced their husbands, So it shows you that once they come up and get their own resources, they don't rely on us anymore. We become useful for a different purpose. And then they have the choice to say, I want to deal with this or I don't, as opposed to a woman who didn't have her own means. She had to kind of suck it up, but a woman today can say, this relationship doesn't make me happy, because that's kind of what we've made relationships about, personal happiness, when it used to be about duty, about community, about building and culture and all that type of stuff. And now it's about, how does this person make me happy? So women are seeking happiness in relationships, which is the wrong purpose of it. So that's going to, of course, lead to, being unsatisfied. But then there's also the aspect of, if you want me to protect you, you kind of have to submit to at least some level of my authority. And if you can make your own money, have your own house, have your own car, get a rose and, a dog and all that type of stuff, then you don't really need a man. It's hard to bring those two things together unless you're willing to change your mindset. You have to, like a child, for example, has no freedom. It's totally secure, though, with a good parent, totally secure, But as it gets older and older, it gets a bit more freedom and a little less security. And eventually it gets out there to where you are now responsible just for yourself. So you don't necessarily have any security, but you have 100% of the freedom. And that's where women are. They're now responsible for themselves. That was the fight, that some of them fought. And now they are free to do what they want to do.
Are women and men, are they showing, or have they shared regret for not having a spouse as they've gotten older?
Some. I've heard, you said men and women? I haven't heard it too much from men, to be honest with you. Most of the men that I know are out of marriages now. They were married, now they're out of marriages. So I haven't heard it from too many men. I've heard them talk about things they would have done different in the marriage, Okay. All right. And as far as the women, what I've found is, yes, they do have that sense of regret, but then at the same time, it's almost like, but I get to do what I want to do, So that's what I mean, that conflict. It's like the freedom versus the security. You're out here on your own. You get to do what you want to do, but you're kind of out here on your own, So that they end up feeling it. But I guess they just kind of make do with it, because I see a lot of women doing that. You know what I'm saying? But then I see a lot of women also get to that stage in, like, say, their 40s or whatever, and then start saying, I want a husband. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's what I'm saying earlier with the conflict. There's like a nature versus the nurture type thing, where they're like, the message that they've been receiving is, I'm independent, I'm strong, I don't need no man. Like, men aren't as smart as us. Men aren't the ones who bring life into the world, all these different types of things. And it kind of makes them look down on men. And then they expect to find an equal doing that, or even not even an equal, somebody that they can look up to and admire. It's hard for them to bring those things together.
And what do you think the future is of the institution of marriage in the Black community?
I think, well, because of like what happened like through the 60s or whatever with the fatherlessness and all that, I think that we kind of have a, how am I trying to say it? Like we have, I think we have a greater desire to do it, you know, to get to a place where we are a community, where it looks the way we imagine the 50s and the 40s and stuff, how our families were and our communities were. I think that we have that desire and that goal. So it kind of depends on like maybe the generation behind us or the one behind them. Like maybe like around the 15 age, I think it kind of depends on what they desire. You know, how they look at, like say for example, most of my generation at least we were raised by our mothers. So that gives us the desire to be the best fathers ever. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of skews the way things are going to go based on the desire of that generation. So I don't know what this generation is necessarily seeing, but I hear a lot more talk about returning back to conservative principles as far as like marriage, like what they say, the nuclear family and things like that. Those ideas are kind of like taking over. And it's becoming, what I'm hearing is it's becoming like the new rebellion, you know, to do it this way instead, you know, where there was the rebellion against religion. Seems like there's kind of like a return back to it because people see a value in what it brought, you know. So it depends on what I think that generation admires or dislikes about what we did as far as relationships, you know, what they see and don't like about us and want to go the opposite way. So if they're seeing a bunch of the dating culture and with the hookup culture and stuff like that, and they don't like the results, then I think that could bring that resurgence of people marrying, you know.
It seems like the lifespan of hookup culture is short because the brothers that I know that have been, and I'm in a skewed demographic because I only deal with married men or people who are about to get married.
Yeah.
But those who are like, that just got married or trying to get married, they seem burnt out with hookup culture. Have you heard that or no?
Yeah, I got friends that say that all the time, you know, because, I mean, it's a lot of personalities to deal with, you know, and in this day specifically where we're so polarized against each other, it could be almost impossible to communicate sometimes, you know. So when you find somebody that you really like, it's like you don't really want to abandon that, you know, because it's not so easy to just find another person of quality, you know, these days it seems. So yeah, I mean, I know, and to me personally, I'm like, I don't understand. That's me, but I'm not everyone. You know, that's one thing I had to realize is that not everybody desires what I desire. You know, so when I listen to people and I hear what they actually want, I mean, who wouldn't want lifelong companionship at the end of the day, you know? And when you are, as a man, it can cost you a lot to be in hookup culture because you're paying for everything for the most part. You know, you're doing all the work, you're doing the pursuit and all that type of stuff. It could become overwhelming. It could kill your ego, you know, and you're only getting older and older, you know, so it's you got a limited time on that as well.
You had the fortunate experience of speaking to many divorced men. What are some of the things that they regret that they said they should have done better in their marriage?
I think it boils down to not really understanding that the woman is complaining, like, or how serious that complaint is. You know what I mean? I had an experience where I'm taking off of them for a second. I had an experience where my cousin was telling me about how she was in her relationship, her last relationship. And she was rattling off all these things, and I'm listening. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, cuz that's what makes you dope, like my mom. And right as I'm thinking that, she smacks a counter. And cousin, I'm tired of being the man in my relationships. And when she said that, I'm like, wait, you was complaining? I thought you was rattling off your strengths, you know? And at that moment, I realized that I've been seeing these women's burden as a strength, you know, thinking that they want to take the lead, you know, because that's kind of what the narrative is. She knows better than you. Why don't you listen to her? And it's like that kind of thing. So you kind of believe that, and then you create this space for a woman to do that, and then it makes her feel, it takes her out of her feminine, you know, and then she doesn't feel comfortable anymore, and then she can't necessarily trust you to lead. So I've heard that so many times, And at first, it was a very foreign thing. I couldn't understand it, you know. But recently, we've been having these conversations. I credit a lot of it to Kevin Samuels, you know, making the distinguish between the feminine woman and the masculine woman. When, for the most part, the masculine woman was seen as the strong woman, you know, the strong, independent woman, one to be admired for her strength. You know, she don't need your help carrying those bags. She don't need your money. She could do it all on her own, but does she want to? That's the question that nobody ever asks, you know. Yeah, she can do it all. You know, we're trying to make this thing where women are equal to men, but do they want to be equal to men? Because, you know, maybe the commercial out there or what they'll say in public is one thing, but when you get in the house, it's a totally different thing. She wants to feel like a woman. You know, she wants to feel like she's relying on a leader. She wants to feel dumb in comparison to you. She wants to feel like you can teach her something. You know, that you can, when she's going through her emotional turmoil, she wants to know that she can rely on you to be stable, you know, so that when she comes down, you know, when that's all over, she's like, oh my God, thank you for being a rock, as opposed to being just as tumultuous as I am, you know, but they teach you to be just as tumultuous as she is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just get back to the specific things. The specific things men have said they regretted before their divorce.
So that would be the main thing, honestly, is not knowing that they were supposed to step up, or not knowing how they were supposed to step up. You know, because like I said, there seems to be a conflict between the message that women give and what their actual nature desires, and there's a vulnerability that they wouldn't want to let that man have, as far as telling them exactly what they would need to do, because then is it genuine when you do it? So it's like that's a conflict that comes in with it as well, you know.
And I noticed too, man, is that the women with these, I guess you would say it, masculine woman, whatever, they never learned how to interact with a man. I think that's the part we're leaving out. Like a lot of these women, unfortunately, never learned how to interact with a man. And the man didn't really know how to interact with a woman outside of his mother. Yeah. So it's a lot of learning that needs to take place. And people need to be open to learning. I think that's the biggest problem. They're not open to learning. They're not open to constructive criticism. And they're not open to applying the constructive criticism. Yes. I think that's like the source of the thing I noticed, because, yes, there's a lot of criticism about women, but it's like you can't really criticize someone for something that they don't know. We can hold them accountable for not wanting to know it. But I think it's too much criticism in the sense that, like, they don't, when you see their backstory and you see like they've never really interacted with a real man. Yeah. No one has ever held them accountable or told them this can't work.
Yeah. I experienced
and I think that's the biggest problem. And I just think that it goes back to the fatherhood issue. It's just a cycle.
Yeah, it is.
You never had a man just tell you like, yo, you can't wear that to go outside.
Right.
What are you talking like?
I know,
you can't wear that to go outside. You know, simple like that.
Yeah.
They never heard that.
Right.
So if a dude tells them, like, you can't wear this to go outside because that's inappropriate, it's this big uproar. Yeah. And he's trying to tell you, like, yo, that's not a good look.
Right. Exactly. That's one of the things that is become painfully obvious. You know, I survey women all the time. It's like they want you to protect them from everything but themselves. You know, you don't have the authority or the right to do that, but you have the responsibility for her safety still. And that's just not a good place to be in. You know, and what you're saying is spot on. Like, I've dealt with several women where one in particular with that what she wanted from a man, she had kind of been complaining about never getting. You know, and then when she finally got with somebody that she thought fit that bill, she didn't know what to do with it, you know, and it was so eye-opening for me, because before, lip service would work. You know, a woman could talk a good game about where she's at mentally and all that stuff, and then you get into that situation, it's like, wow. And she literally said it. She's only dealt with men that she looked down on because they were the ones that approached her all the time, so she would go with it.
And it's another, man, there's another thing with that too I learned, is that this feeling worthy of. So my brother was breaking this down, right? And it made sense. You see this, it's almost like preying on a man that's beneath you. It's easier work. He can't say much to you.
Yeah.
It's just a control vibe. So you don't have to do much, because it's like he's not going to hold you to a standard.
Right.
Because he's kind of like dependent on you.
Yeah.
So that's like a cop-out.
Yeah.
Then another reason too, man, is the self-worth. They don't feel worthy of a person on a certain heights.
Right.
So they can say whatever they want, right? But they'll purposely work with a person that's quote unquote beneath them because that's their comfort zone. Now, if you go to a guy that's in a different, if you actually were with the man that you claim you want to be with, you may have to keep your weight in check.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You may have to work on yourself.
Right.
You will have to work on yourself. You have to do more stuff around the house.
Right.
And he'll push you in the pursuits of your life.
Yeah.
So in order to not deal with that, I will deal with the next man over here, then curse him out and complain. But it's like you made that decision.
Exactly. And you're literally shaping your neural network with these men. You know what I mean? So when you get, like you said, you don't have the foundation internally to even deal with this man.
That's the mind-boggling thing about. I'm not big on the female gender wars, but when I hear a certain conversation, it's just like you have nothing to attract the man that you want. Nothing. Nothing at all for initial attraction, better yet for this man to be around you. So it's total delusion.
Yes, and that's what you're saying. You can't criticize, and no one can take the constructive criticism. You know.
But that's what we're dealing. We're dealing with full-blown delusion on both sides, men and women. We're talking about women. I want to balance it out. We're talking about men too, but it's like it's delusional in the sense that I see certain men look a certain way if I criticizing women. It's like, why would a woman be attracted to you?
Right. Yeah. Or listen when you don't know how to communicate.
You know what I'm saying? Like just in general, like how would you attract this type of woman?
Yeah. It's real.
And like until yourself on a certain level, I think everybody just need to like really get in the lab and work on themselves.
Exactly. And it almost feels like, in a sense, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it feels like when you do that, you only separate yourself further. Okay. Yeah.
You have a lot of options at that point.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. All right, Fire, we give thanks for the conversation, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, man.